Welcome to HeartMind-ify. Before we start the show, just a reminder to share, rate, and subscribe to this podcast wherever you're listening to it. And please give us a 5-star rating. It helps us beat the big tech algorithms.
I'm John Izzy. Change can be difficult for a lot of us, but when we understand what makes us tick, we develop a better understanding of who we are and begin a journey of discovering our best self. Join me for a free session at johnizzy.com.
And I'm Kim Cordy, creator of the Emotion Chef Framework, an emotion management tool. Thoughts drive emotions, and emotions drive thoughts, but it's our emotions that drive our decisions and behaviors. Find out more at kimcordy.com.
Sit back, relax, and enjoy the show. Knowing each other personally and socially for the past 10 years, Kim and John have joined forces, bringing years of experience and training, providing a platform for growth and personal development, along with a little humor. John is the heart, Kim is the mind, and together they are HeartMind-ify. Well, hello, Kim, and how are you doing today?
I'm doing quite well, John. How are you?
You know, I'm doing pretty well, thanks. It's been a busy week so far, and it's only Tuesday, but I guess that's a good thing. You know, a thought came to mind last week during a very difficult time for the world, and we were talking afterwards how important communication is when talking about what we believe. You know, when we're talking about our values, what we believe, what's important to us, communication is so important. But not only that, it's what is being heard or received by the listener, right? So It's important that I communicate effectively, but it's also important that the receiver is listening to what I'm saying, or that I'm being clear, or that they're paying attention. And anyway, so then I hung up the phone with you and I had another thought. Imagine that. I always have
Does it ever stop?
No. The thought was this: how effective is our communication during these podcasts? Do our listeners really listen to what we have to say? And if they don't, are we communicating effectively? Or is it filtered based on their own experiences and different social relationships, right?
Right.
During coaching sessions, one of the greatest frustrations that a client goes through is when I ask for clarification. It's almost as if I say to them, I wasn't paying attention, or you didn't make yourself clear. And I kind of feel bad about that. But I also think it's important to make sure that what I heard was what was actually communicated to me. So this is why we're talking about this week, guys. It's about effective communication and how important it is to be clear and to make sure that what we say is understood by others. What do you think?
I agree. And this is going to be a great topic because it isn't just about our words. It's about controlling what you can control, right? You can't control the other person and how they're going to receive information, but you can do your best to present it the best that you can and to be as clear and concise, which is what we try and do. We battle over what we say, and not battle, but within ourselves, we strive very hard to communicate our points of view as effectively as possible. So yes, it is important for us and everybody.
I can't agree with you more. You know, I was sitting in the chair the other day thinking, when did we start communicating and at what age? Now, I understand that communication existed in the womb, but we begin to learn from others at the time we are born. When we're hungry, our mothers immediately know when it's time to eat based on the type of cry. And this continues with words and gestures as we grow and learn. For me, where communication fails is when there is something that is blocking our ability to convey a certain message, or the receiver does not hear what is being communicated. So really, it's a two-way street. Earlier, I said I feel badly when I have to ask for clarification during a coaching session. When I ask that question, the response is usually, I don't know. And then there is this back and forth that takes place until the client finds the words to express what they are actually feeling or dealing with. And then we can work together more effectively. Looking for the right words can, and for some, be very difficult. Everyone communicates differently, whether it's verbal or nonverbal communication. And we use these types of communication all the time. But it's not just a matter of communication. Have you ever watched Ellen's Game of Games?
I enjoy that show so
Right?
much. She's
Love
so
it.
much fun. I
Oh
know.
my God. I love the show.
She's hysterical. And what she does to people, it's fun.
Oh, it's hilarious. She has a game that is similar to the phone game. Remember when you were little and you played the phone game? Well, she calls it the hearing things game. And the point of the game is this. A contestant is giving a phrase that he or she must repeat to another person. And in turn, that person repeats to another person until all 7 people or so have heard the phrase. Then the last person repeats what they heard, and they count how many words were correct in the original phrase. It's hilarious, but it also gives insight into the other side of communication, and that is the receptor, or the one that is listening. So, Kim, do you think there is a difference between listening and hearing? Because I think there is, and I think that's crucial.
Oh, absolutely. There's a difference. You hear all the time, but it doesn't mean you're paying attention. There's background noise. There's maybe a radio going. The TV's in the background. So the act of hearing is just the sound waves entering our ears, while listening, or it should be rather, more about the mindful attention to the words that are being delivered. And that is the key difference. It's paying attention. Hearing is involuntary unless you're deaf, right?
Right.
It just happens where we get distracted by those sounds around us. So maybe we have automatic negative thoughts. If that's something I talk about in my class, that we are assuming or presuming what's being said. Like we think we know that person so well, or we think we know their position so well that we are already in response mode. We're responding to things that have not been communicated because we think we know. That disrupts the ability to listen when you're thinking.
Lord knows I've done that before.
Well, hey, everybody has. It's just, how do we pay attention, right?
Yeah.
And then there's other distractions. We have trained our brain to focus on our phones. We pay every time that bell or that notification thing, boom, I got to look and see, right?
That's a good point.
If you've got a ding on your computer, oh, that means I've got an email. If you have your phone within eyesight, even if it's face down, your brain has been trained, because why? Neurons that fire together, wire together. And we have done this so many times that your brain's like, what's going on in that phone? What's going on the computer that I'm missing? So, or maybe the computer, like I said, or TV, kids, things can distract us because our hearing's still going on while we're pretending to listen. But unfortunately, our brain can't multitask. So while we are paying attention to the phone and whether there is a notification, we're not listening. That's some of the things that keep us from being good listeners.
So what you're saying is that it's just as important for the receptor to take an active role in listening and put in the effort. Because if they're just hearing, then they might miss the meaning that's being communicated.
Exactly.
So for people that are told, you aren't listening to me, are there any tricks for them to become better listeners, do you think?
I definitely have tricks. Curiosity is such a great thing. And if you, instead of assuming, and you know what happens when you assume,
Oh,
you make
yeah.
an ass out of you and
And
me.
me.
So instead of assuming, if you're curious about what's going to be said, then you're going to pay attention. And that allows that conversation to grow and to have value. Otherwise, you're not really having a conversation, you're having an assumption and your point of view. Also, to create attentiveness, and that's
Mm,
on your side and on behalf of the listener. You can tell when someone's not listening. I know that you said you felt like sorry that your clients maybe thought you weren't paying attention. But when you ask someone, I I just want to make sure that I heard you correctly, and that what you just said to me is what I received is what you were trying to present.
mhm.
This is what I heard. Then that gives them the opportunity to clarify. If you think you weren't listening correctly, or if you were distracted by your phone, you can self-correct for them. You can let them know I really wasn't listening, which is
Right.
fair. It happens.
And it's
Um,
honest, right? And
and
that's
it's
key.
and it
Yep.
shows you care.
Yep.
On the other side, if I notice that somebody might not be really paying attention to what I'm saying, I could say, look, I want to make sure that what I said was clear to you. So can you tell me what you heard? Because I
Uh,
want to make sure that you heard me correctly. And then that
oh, that's
way
good.
there's no miscommunication. If they did hear you, they're going to tell you so. If not, you could say, well, here, let me say it again another way to make, and then you can restate it. And because they didn't get it the first time,
Mhm.
they're likely to pay attention.
Yeah. No, that's good. And this is great information for listeners and for people that are involved in the communication, but they're not taking the active role of communicating. They're more of the receptor.
So this is actually what I was just thinking, John, is that it's an active sport. If
Yeah.
you
Good
are
point.
playing a game, I don't care if it's basketball or baseball, you are paying attention to what's going on the other team. And if you think of conversation as an active sport, whether you have possession of the ball or not, you're keeping your eye on the ball.
No, that's a really good point.
It gives a visualization, right?
Yeah, absolutely it does.
Yeah. The ball is the conversation.
The ball's the conversation. But what about the person doing the talking, right?
Right.
I think we don't spend enough time working on effective communication. We just say what's on our mind and we go on with things. But let me give you an example. I had this speech class. It was Speech 101 in college. And the first assignment was to give instructions on how to do something. Pretty simple speech, right? But my assignment was to give directions to get to a local place in town, starting from my dorm. Well, I lived off campus, so this was a little more difficult because some of the roads had an exit ramp, so there was going to be more obstacles in the directions that I needed to give. And I quickly realized this was not going to be an easy task. Why? Because the college I went to was in the north, and there were a lot of people from the south or even the West Coast. So I had to make sure that the words I used reflected exactly the same for everyone in the class. So here's a perfect example of that. No matter who gives me directions right now today, if they use the word yonder, I'm completely lost. I mean, do you know what yonder means, Kim?
Yes. I think that's even in some old songs. And plus, my mom was from the South, and I've spent a lot of time in the South. But yes, yonder, I know. Over yonder.
Well,
Yes.
yonder's not a word that I grew up with, so it's always confusing to me. Is it 1 mile? Is it 3 miles? Is it an hour? I don't know. But the reason I bring this up is because it's important to choose your words carefully, because what is being communicated to another person is also being filtered by the receiver based on their social differences or the way that they were brought up and the words that they used. In coaching, I run into this problem a lot. Because I'm an online coach, I see people from all over. And my dialect or the way I use certain words might have a different meaning than what my client is familiar with. You laugh at me all the time because of certain words and phrases I say, don't you?
Not all the time. Not all the time. Every
I
once in
know.
a while.
But honestly, though, I would believe, as someone that offers classes online like yourself, that you might run into this as well. Do you worry, or maybe worry is not the right word? I don't know. But are you conscious of this?
Absolutely. I mean, this is what the Emotion Chef is all about. It's about learning more emotion words, understanding what they mean and how to apply them in everyday life. Words matter in your brain quite a bit. And you're right, how a word is taken or used in one part of the world and versus another, it is different, but you have to give clarification and you need to give context around how you're using it in order to make sure that the meaning gets across.
Yeah, no, that's good. But I want everybody to understand that I do know what the word yonder means. I've come to realize that yonder simply means, well, I actually had to look it up in the dictionary. It simply means an unknown distance between 2 points. So there you have it.
But yonder doesn't mean far away, though. It's just over yonder, meaning it's not that far. It's just a little further down the road.
Yeah, okay, see, I'm still confused. But the point is, how do I communicate more effectively? And what is my communication or conversation style? I didn't know exactly, so I looked it up because I wonder at times, if people look confused when I'm giving a talk or something, you know, what is my communication style at that moment and how can I help myself to better get my message across? So here are three different types of or four different types of communication or communication styles, according to goodtherapy.org, which is a great site, by the way. There are four styles: are assertive, aggressive, passive, and passive aggressive. Each of them are characterized by specific language, behaviors, and effects, right? Understanding the communication style is helpful to an individual in becoming better able to make the adjustments needed to facilitate the growth and development of all the relationships. And that's marriage, friendship, work relationships, any relationships that you have. So let's quickly go through them, and maybe this will resonate with some of our listeners. A person who communicates assertively is likely to be clear, direct, and honest about thoughts and emotions, ensuring that feelings are expressed in appropriate ways. A person who communicates assertively may believe or make statements to the effect of, "We are both equally entitled to our opinion." Assertive communication is recommended communication style that is considered to be both healthy and effective. So in the assertive communication right there, you get the respect, right? The respect is your opinion is just as important as my opinion, and I respect that.
Right. And if you think about, because we're going into aggressive, but when you think about assertive, it's someone who's confident. It's somebody who has a strong conviction in how they feel. So assertive person in conversation means that they are a forceful personality.
Right. No, that's good. But that's different than the aggressive communicator, right?
Right.
Because that's characterized by a clear and direct expression of feelings. An expression can occur in an inappropriate manner that may violate the rights of the others. So we've gone from respecting each other to violating the rights of the other. I will get my way regardless of the consequences, right? That's that aggressive communication style.
And you know how I like to visualize things. So if you think of an aggressive dog or an aggressive person, they're ready to confront, they're ready to attack, and that is puts you in a defensive mode, right?
That's right. In passive communication, one's thoughts and feelings are generally not expressed openly or honestly. So when opinions are stated, they may be expressed in such a way that they are disregarded by others. So a person who communicates in a passive way may experience difficulty realizing or expressing personal opinions and desires. And in some cases, this can lead others to take advantage or violate an individual's rights. A person who tends to communicate in a passive way may be more likely to be used by others and may think or say, everyone walks over me. It doesn't matter what I say, everybody walks over me. And then we get to the passive aggressive person, or the passive aggressive communication style, which tends to express their thoughts and feelings in an unclear or confusing way. These individuals may at first appear to be passive, but later act out of anger in an indirect manner. So individuals who communicate in a passive-aggressive way may feel powerless. They could feel stuck or resentful of their current circumstances. But they may be unable to address their communications directly. Instead, they may seek to undermine the source of their resentment with subtle expressions of anger. Passive-aggressive behavior may be generally characterized by outward cooperation and internal frustration and resentment.
It's kind of funny when you think about the first two, because the first one was confident,
right?
And then when you come to passive, now you are lacking the confidence. And when you're passive aggressive, now you're lacking confidence, but you're mad about it.
That's right. So when I hear a passive communicator or somebody who is passive aggressive, I always switch it up on them. And I usually say, well, tell me what you actually feel. Forget about getting anything correct. Forget about any of the knowledge that you might have heard previously. What is it that you're actually feeling? Tell me what you're feeling. And then you get into a deeper type of communication and they feel respected, and then they can understand what it is that is going on inside of them, and the conversation switches immediately. So it goes back to that assertive communicator who can respect others in their conversation. And if you faced with a passive aggressive person, flip it on them and say, look, I really want to hear what you believe because I think what you're saying has value. And then let them struggle in finding the correct words. Because if we don't allow people to struggle, or if we don't allow people to find what it is that they want to talk about, then we're not going to give anybody a chance to grow or to be clear on what they're communicating. So that's my thought on that. But the reason I bring this up is because I believe it's important to understand how you communicate, how we communicate. Are you always assertive, or are you a mix of all four? Understanding how you communicate will help you in becoming more effective. You know, I can tell you in my coaching, I find a lot of people are more passive. Here's the interesting thing, though. I do see a mix of all of them at times. I've caught myself unable to communicate effectively. So I compensate in those situations by being reflective and using terms like I believe, I feel. Instead of coming off as being a jerk, I'm respecting another person's opinion. This goes back to what I said earlier. One of the things I rarely say are words like should, or if someone passes away, I never say I'm sorry. I always say thank you for telling me. And I say that because sometimes we can't find the words to express what we are trying to communicate. So my rule of thumb is to give support and respect rather than show disrespect by trying to fix or offer advice when we're communicating. And this goes back to Kim's point. It's just as important to listen as it is to communicate effectively.
Yes. John, when you were talking about showing respect, part of that showing respect is referred to as conversational receptiveness. And if you think about, I'm going to go back to a visual because I love visuals. Can you say something and imagine going back to the conversation as a ball? Are your words going out that someone can catch? Or is it something that they're just going to drop because they don't want to be a part of the game?
Oh, that's a good image. I like that.
So to the extent in which parties are in disagreement, their willingness to engage with each other's views is going to be considered how receptive they are in that conversation. Communication gets stunted in situations where people don't agree, right?
Right.
Like when you have polarizing topics such as we see today, be it politics, race relations, maybe it's even how we should go about managing anything. The more opposite we are, the more polarized we are. And if, once again, using a visual, if you think about on this earth, we can't be further apart than if we are on either pole of this earth. And that's how some of us are in conversation. And so, how can we be more receptive? Being receptive, first of all, it doesn't mean that you agree with them. It just means that you're willing to hear their point of view. When we give thoughtful consideration to another point of view, it opens up the way for the other person to do likewise. When, I think you even said this earlier, when you're like, my way or the highway, it doesn't lend itself to receptive listening. And also, if you're open to them, it might give you an adjustment to having a different viewpoint, perhaps a better understanding of the opposing view, which I think you were talking about earlier.
Yeah.
So what you think you may know, perhaps you don't know. And this is where that curiosity comes into play. Yep. But by truly listening and then responding in a way that shows you listened, it is respecting the other party or parties in any kind of conflict. Because the goal in a conflict should not be to make your point, but to engage in a thoughtful and respectful conversation.
Kim,
so
Kim, I want to stop for 1 second because I think this is so important to repeat. The goal, and I think I heard you correctly, the goal in a conflict shouldn't be to make your point, but to engage in a thoughtful and respectful conversation. Did I get that right?
You did. Because
that's so
otherwise there's no getting anywhere.
Yeah.
Your point will never be heard because you're not hearing the other side. And that's the whole goal of receptive conversation, receptive listening, is that you listen to each other and you respect what they say. Respect does not equate to what's a good word, to being convinced.
Right.
But it might open up you to being more sympathetic or having more empathy or understanding a point of view that you just didn't hear before because you weren't listening. I don't know about you, John. I don't know everything. I don't know what it's like to be in someone else's shoes until I listen to them.
Yeah, I get it. You know, as you were talking, what came to mind was this. If I'm listening, and I mean truly listening to what is being communicated to me, and I engage in conversation without respect, then we're going to be left with opposing views, and nothing gets done. But if I listen with respect and put my personal biases aside, I open the door for a more meaningful discussion that can lead to not only a better conversation, but a conversation that might lend itself to change. You know, maybe it's my downfall, Kim, but I believe that everyone has good intentions. But sometimes they're clouded or not respected by the way we communicate and listen to each other. But if we listen intently and with respect, then it's not just a compromise, but we develop collaboration.
Yep, it's a collaboration. And so asking questions as to why they feel the way they feel, showing interest in how they got to that point. Studies have shown, because obviously I read a study on this, because I love
Imagine
my studies.
That, right?
You know what, John? I didn't tell you this, but I'm actually taking a Coursera course on reading medical studies because I enjoy
Oh,
medical
wow.
studies to
Nice.
improve my ability to read them. I learned from my ex-husband, but I figured I'll learn a lot more from this person who is a researcher.
No, that's
But
good.
my point is that in that research article, they talked about how people who are receptive are more likely to go out and research and find disconfirming information out there, to find something to either confirm their point or disconfirm their point. The way you learn isn't looking at what you know, it's trying to understand what you don't know. And because what you don't know is what can get you in trouble.
Yeah.
And might lead you to a wrong conclusion, especially when you're so convinced that your side is right. Like how horrible. Like what would it look like if that person were correct?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
What
No,
would it look
definitely.
like if you were wrong? Because you know what it looks like when it's right. So these are just some things to spur thought, right? To not
Hmm.
just listen to other people, but to think. So, like I said, asking questions, showing interest, it can help you get to either the bottom of the issue or maybe come to a healthy place where you can agree to disagree, or maybe even better, find a compromise that leads to a resolution that works for both parties.
Yeah, I agree.
It's also, especially in heated conversations, good to have boundaries around the words that are being used. Your the tone of the conversation, and to say if it goes outside of these boundaries, we need to stop and come back to it later. And boundaries are good for conversations, but they're also good just in life in general. And you have to have a box or a line that says, if you cross this, I'm not going to be able to continue in this environment. I'm happy to engage with you, but we'll wait till we are not so heated. Or I'll engage with you when you're not using violent language, and making sure that you keep your conversation respectful.
Yeah. And this is a great segue, Kim, into next week's interview podcast, where we're inviting a guest on our show to talk about this specific topic on boundaries.
Yes. Angie, who's our guest,
Hmm.
actually has coached me with boundaries, because as much as you think, and I can say I still have so much to learn, but as much as I thought I had good boundaries and had developed good boundaries, she helped me to see where I still had some more to put up. I personally have benefited so much from her, and I think our listeners will too. She's
No,
amazing.
she is really good. The times where I've talked to Angie and actually communicated with her, she has a really good perspective on boundaries and knowing when to get involved, evaluating yourself so that, you're not overextending yourself just because you want to, right? It's respecting your own space. So I'm really looking forward to hearing what she has to say, and I think it's going to be a great show.
Yeah, I was thinking about it as you were talking, John, that we're talking about conversations, and Angie would actually say, is this a conversation that you even need to be in
Good point.
when it comes to boundaries? So I think you guys will learn a lot from our lovely Angie.
Yeah, I think so too. So look, I'm looking at the Squadcast recording software here, and every time Kim and I record, she's always given a name. It's like this. It's a thing that Squadcast does. It's hilarious because today you are the patient guest. I love it. It's just we'll see what you are next week, but right now you are the patient guest. I love it. Anyway, Kim, this has been a great show. I really liked this conversation.
I do too.
And it was good. So anyway, I hope you guys have a great week. Kim, have a great week, and I will talk to you
You
next time.
too.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you all. Bye.
New shows are available every Saturday right here on HeartMind-ify.podbean.com or wherever you listen. Kim and I would like to thank each and every one of you for allowing us to be a small part of your life. Be kind to yourself and remember, our hearts tell the story, but our mind is the conductor.